Hello, I'm Jordan Chittley, and welcome to this edition of Studio Sessions. Studio Session is the Globe Content Studio's live stream show where we interview interesting people about important trends in content. The Globe Content Studio is the content marketing agency of the Globe and Mail. We partner with businesses who are looking to connect their story to our audience by using original content and storytelling. At the Globe and Mail, I edit both the career and drive sections. As 2022 drew to a close, I, along with my colleagues at the Globe Content Studio, did a lot of thinking about content trends that we'll see this year. We wrote about it in that report called Next in Creative, and it's now available to download. As the drive editor, I'm seeing lots of changes in the way EVs, also known as electric vehicles, are being embraced in Canada. And I'm not the only one who has noticed. Matt Bubbers, Globe Drive contributor, prides himself on having driven just about every car you can think of and having spun wheels on just about every part of the world. Today, he joins me to share his thoughts on what businesses and content marketers should be thinking about as the year revs up. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great we get to have this discussion. First, I just want to start off by talking about how both of our days began. I started by shoveling about a foot of snow on my walkway and sidewalk. How did your day begin?
Well, I'm actually out here in California right now in Palm Springs, and I've got the Bentley convertible in for review. And just going for a spin down Palm Springs with the top down, balmy day here.
So, I'm very jealous of that. Sounds like a much better day to start your day than shoveling. All right, before we get into the trends, just start off by telling the audience a little bit more about yourself. Why did you decide to get into this field? What do you like so much about cars?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of a common story, really. I was just like one of those kids who loved cars. That so many kids out there just like become obsessed with cars, and it's not like my parents had any fancy cars growing up or anything. I just had like a voracious appetite for car magazines. I would just read every glossy car magazine I could get my hands on, and it's one of those kids who could tell you like the type of car by the headlights at night or something. It was very like geeky. And so when I got into journalism, I just naturally gravitated towards writing about cars, writing about what I love, cities, transportation, technology, and stuff like that. So, and I think I got lucky, honestly. I think I got lucky because this is the best time to be writing and thinking about automobiles. I mean, they're going through the biggest change they've gone through ever, since their invention. The shift to electric cars, the shift to, kind of software driven cars. It is the biggest change since the Ford Model T. And, it's happening right in front of us in slow motion. We get to kind of have front row seats to that.
I think one of the big things, like I came back to the drive section about a year and a half ago, and I think one of the big reasons why I wanted to come back was for just that reason. Like I've seen people argue the point that the transition from horse and buggy to car is less significant than the transition we're currently going through from gas powered to electric vehicles. And there's certainly no shortage of topics to write about, and really like questions that we try to answer about how this is going to change our lives, how it's going to change what we do, how we move, all that sort of stuff. I want to begin when we're talking about trends, like just by going back a bit. So like we started working together about 8 years ago. And
So long.
a long time. At the time, like we couldn't put EV, like the letters EV in a headline because nobody knew what it meant. And if we did, the stories did not perform all that well. And things have certainly shifted a lot now. Like now, we try to get EV into headlines, and the stories tend to perform better. Um, so, what do you like over the last almost decade? Like, what do you count for all of that change?
I mean, there's so many things to this question, but let me just like back up and give a sense of scale for this because I think that's really important. Today, last year in Canada, the numbers just came out. So it was um, electric vehicles, just pure battery electric vehicles, made up about 7% of all new vehicle sales in Canada. And if you include like hybrids and plug-in hybrids in that, you get to about 9%, which is a new record, absolutely. And it's the growth keeps increasing. But in terms of like the 7%, 9%, it's not a lot, right? But when you look at the polls of just consumers out there in Canada, the polls are saying, and this has been like pretty consistent now for a while. It changes depending on the poll, but roughly 6 in 10 people in Canada are inclined towards getting an EV over a traditional car for their next vehicle. Um, and so, clearly you can see the mismatch, right? Like there is the 7% market penetration, but like, 60% of people kind of want one. So I think we'll see a lot of growth, obviously, in the next few years. And I think the big question is whether supply can keep up with demand. But I've talked to a lot of analysts about this question, and you know, they say the immediate forces, like why EVs, to your question, have kind of boomed in popularity and interest, why people are clicking on these stories. Um, you know, it's customer demand. It's also regulatory pressure pushing the industry toward these, and kind of the industry's making a big splash about their how they're switching to EVs. But I think underneath the demand is just the simple fact that EVs got good. Like you said, 8, 10 years ago, they were kind of a laughing stock. Like they were just some of the worst cars on the road. They were, someone who loves to drive and is like enthusiastic about cars. I kind of shuddered at the thought that these like golf cart boring appliances would become the future of driving. But that didn't turn out to be the case. Today, just 10 years later, EVs are some of the best cars on the road, and that's across all categories. So, whether you're looking at an electric pickup truck, they've got those now, electric SUV, um, and an electric sedan, a super fast electric sports car, luxury car. Um, EVs are across all the different vehicle segments, and that really only happened last year. And they are, yeah, they're in every segment they're in now. They are absolutely some of the best machines on the road.
Yeah, it's amazing to think, like 8 or 10 years ago, a lot of the car companies, it seemed like they're making promises, but it seemed so far off in the future. And at the time, we had these like, well, you had Tesla, which was like really cool and fast, but if you didn't want to
Mhm.
spend 100 grand, you had like like what almost seemed like glorified golf carts. You had like the Leaf, which had like short range, like wasn't, I guess, sort of practical, but and then Chevy came out with the Bolt, which was small and again,
Mhm.
not a ton of range. And there wasn't many places to charge the cars anyways. So unless you had home
Yeah,
charging, you weren't really going very far. Um,
right. And it's
but
just those things got better. Like it's the power, the range, and the price hasn't really come down that much, especially in Ontario where they got rid of the provincial incentives. The kind of base like entry price for a compact EV has stayed more or less like hovering around the same kind of region. But what's got better is like, yeah, the range has the driving range. So how far you can go on a single battery charge has almost doubled, or more, since 10 years ago, since even less than that, actually. The speed at which you can charge. So, say you're going a road trip and you want to just plug in quickly, and get more juice while you stop for coffee. That's changed. So like 10, 15 minutes, you can get a whole lot of battery recharge and keep going. Um, and I think there are just more options, there are just more options, and so you have more competition, which, is pushing the gorilla in the room, Tesla, to be better. They're working on uh, a really revised and heavily updated Model 3 that people are really hyped about. And the competition is just good for consumers. It means, it's pushing industry forward. So it's exciting if you're a driver out there looking for a car right now.
I will say if you're an automaker, anybody who's sort of associated with the auto industry, like even if you're like a fuel retail, like a Shell or a Parkland, who's installing electric chargers at your places, or even like traditional retailers like grocery stores or gyms,
Mhm.
knowing about that delta in actual purchases versus the demand, I think is like it's just going to create an amazing,
Mhm.
like an incredible amount of EVs on the market, but with the caveat of like when people can actually get them. So it
Right.
seems like we're at an interesting time for any of these like a lot of clients we work with, from automakers to other retailers, to be educating the public about what this means for the future. Uh,
Mhm.
but to that caveat, if people can actually get the cars, which seem to be impossible to get right now,
Mhm.
and you just did some reporting on this. So, how hard are electric cars to actually get right now?
Well, last year, they were really hard to get. I mean, demand just vastly outpaced supply, and so you had automakers raising prices, dealerships were raising price, like, they were really expensive and really hard to get, and if you wanted one, there was a good chance that no dealership in your area had one, on the lot, like, ready to be sold, and, they're I'd like to say that's gonna get better this year, that, it's all good, the supply chain problems all fixed now, but no, I spoke to a lot of analysts, and, they said the situation's complicated, basically, that as the chip supply for automobiles specifically improves, um, that will become less of a bottleneck, but, um, the rest of the supply chain, like EV manufacturing, battery manufacturing, that's all rapidly still being ramped up across the world, including at new plants here in Canada, um, in order to meet this booming global demand and the regulatory pressure. So, yeah, to make a long story short, I guess it'll be easier to buy an EV this year, but still maybe not as easy as people like. And the other part of this question is the demand side. So, as the supply, even as the supply improves, um, how will demand change over 2023? And you've got a few factors going in there. First is that by the end of the year, one analyst I talked to said that there could be a doubling of the number of different EV models on sale in North America. So from 40 to 80 different vehicles to choose from by the end of the year, potentially. Um, so you'll have more models, but at the same time, your the battery manufacturing, yeah, is going to be tough to ramp up in time. It takes years and years to build a factory and ramp up everything. So yeah, I think buyers should expect a bit of a tough time, and whether they're going to decide to pull the trigger on a EV this year with interest rates 6, 7, 8, 9, even I've seen 10% for auto loans. It makes EVs, which are already generally more expensive to purchase than their combustion engine counterparts, even more expensive when you're borrowing that money at such a high interest rate. So the demand side is a bit of a question, with the economic headwinds that we're facing this year, but I think it will get easier to buy an EV. So if you're frustrated right now, know that they are coming, and the federal government, has had some really, I think, ambitious but good targets on EV sales. So if you're a company that's thinking about putting in an EV charger, um, yeah, do it. That you can. They're kind of guaranteeing that the market will be there right now.
So when we hear stories of wait lists of like 2 to 3 years for a car,
Mhm.
do you do you think that is going to be coming down in 2023?
I Yeah, I think it will be coming down, based on what I've heard from again all the analysts I spoke to, supply will improve. Um, the big question mark is just demand, like how many um, other potential EV buyers are you going to be competing with? Nobody really knows. And also, with the finite number of EVs that can be produced globally, you're not just competing with other customers in Canada. It's like Canadian consumers are competing with people in Europe and Asia, to get some of the finite numbers of EVs that are being produced these days. So, um, yeah, I think, but that said, waitlist times should be coming down. The likelihood of you finding an EV on a dealer lot this year going to be better than last year.
So I guess theoretically, in basic economic terms, if
Mhm.
what you're saying, more supply, both in terms of options and number of cars, that would suggest that prices may be coming down.
I mean, I think this was one of the stories that was so hyped at the beginning of the year. There was like EV price war. Everyone's going, Tesla fired the first shot. They lowered prices. Ford followed suit. And then it was like, okay, now it's on. All these prices are coming down. But that didn't really happen. For all the headlines about price wars, let me just say it's yet to happen. So, and what really happened was Ford and Tesla, who had both raised some of the prices on their popular EVs last year, during that peak demand and supply shortage, they raised their prices. This year, they're kind of bringing some of those prices back down more in line with like 2021 levels. So to say that EVs are getting cheaper, it's not really the case. They're just kind of bringing prices back down to let me say, like a more sane level this year after last year's craziness. But that's it. It's still only February, and we'll see how demand kind of shakes out in the rest of the year, I think, and how supply goes. And yeah, I don't think anyone's ruling out further price cuts. Potentially, a few automakers have come out and said that they're not they're not doing price cuts. Volkswagen Group being one of them, but we'll see. I think if you're out there thinking about buying an EV or hoping they're suddenly going to get cheap this year, I don't think that's the case. But they are going to be cheaper than last year, which is good news.
And like you said before, like in regards to interest rates, like with them being like probably significantly higher than when a lot of people would have bought their last vehicle,
Hmm.
it might not, like unless you're paying cash, it might not actually make the car cheaper at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And the interest rate hikes are absolutely erasing any of these price drops. Uh, like you said, if you're financing um, one of these cars, and that is a problem for EVs in particular, I think, because yeah, the barrier to entry is a little bit higher still than it is for a comparable combustion engine car, a gasoline car. Um, and that is, that purchase price, even though there's a pretty strong case to be made that drivers will actually offset that additional purchase price in fuel and maintenance savings over the course of vehicle ownership. Um, for most drivers, if you have a decent amount, there's a lot of caveats to that. But even though that purchase price will be offset, I think it's still just it's just still a barrier for people, for consumers. And polls, you know, do say that price is still a factor. It's not the number one barrier, or it hasn't been in the past when interest rates were cheap. That might be curious to see if that changes this year. But um, yeah, price is still definitely a factor, and the interest rates are pretty painful right now.
Um, Speaking of reasons why people don't are cautious about buying EVs.
Mhm.
The two reasons that always seem to show up on most surveys, including the Globe Drive survey that we do, is like lack of range, lack of infrastructure.
Mhm.
So what are you seeing in terms of like what's happening this year, particularly in Canada, with building out the infrastructure and also in terms of increasing range in cars? And I
Yeah.
will also like not to double barrel the question, but like if we build out the infrastructure better, do you
Mhm.
think the cars really need all that range?
I mean, that's a great question, and I mean, let me start with that part, I guess, because yeah, we've been seeing range increase, and so we've been seeing cars with 4, 5, 6, now 800 kilometers of range. One company was talking about an EV with 1,000 kilometers of range, but the chief executive, it was Mercedes. He said that nobody needs that. We're probably not going to make that an EV with 1,000 kilometers of range ever because it's just unnecessary. Um, and I think as the range increases, uh, the charging infrastructure becomes less important. But on the flip side, if you want to make EVs more affordable, you make the batteries smaller, which are the most expensive part of an EV. So you make the batteries smaller, you can make more EVs for the same amount of battery raw materials. Um, Prices would come down, and if EV infrastructure improves, if it's easy and great and ubiquitous, um, and people become accustomed to it, then yeah, you wouldn't need EVs with such long range, and it could spur adoption faster. There'd be all other kinds of benefits too. You wouldn't have EVs that were as heavy, meaning they would take less energy to move. They'd be more efficient, um, better for the environment. So yeah, I think there's after this push to have super long range EVs, um, there could be this kind of swing back to like shorter range EVs as the charging infrastructure improves, which would really help adoption. Um, and I mean, personally, that's actually something I would like to see. Uh, but the first part of your question was about charging infrastructure and what the outlook for that is in Canada. And in short, it's like it's not enough. Um, and there's all these polls about the places with the most charging infrastructure and the highest EV adoption, like here in California, are places where customers are least happy with or least satisfied with the infrastructure and the charging experience. So it just shows that you really want to get the infrastructure out ahead of the like mass adoption of EVs. And in Canada, we're not doing a great job of that so far. There's lots of questions about rural infrastructure is really lagging in more remote communities. They might be some of the last to get on this. And yeah, we've just got to do better. And I know the federal government's earmarked a big chunk of money to go along with their ZEV mandate. So EV charging, there's a lot of investment, but the numbers that all these studies predict that how many EV chargers we need, like I think it was like 500,000 or something in the next few years. We're just nowhere close to having this ubiquitous, beautiful, smooth EV charging experience. You can see a glimmer of hope, like you can see how it will get there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think on the infrastructure, like I think the report suggested 440,000 charging
Hmm.
stations by I think it was 2035,
Hmm.
when all new cars sold have to
That's
be
right.
electrified in some way.
Mhm.
And right now we're at about
And
17,000, and the vast majority of those, like 13,000 or something, are level 2 chargers,
mhm.
which if you have a fully electric car, it's still gonna take, like, sort of in the 6 to 8-hour range to charge your car. So you're not pulling up to a level 2 charger at the grocery store and getting a full top up in the amount of time you're grocery shopping. Um,
Yeah.
but
I mean, to
there's
your
very few, like, DC fast chargers
mhm.
in Ontario right now.
Yeah, and that is a problem. I mean, there's also, not many cars that can take advantage of that full super fast DC level 3 fast charging. Sorry for all the jargon here, but, there's just yeah, there's a few very fast chargers, and there's few cars that can take advantage of that still. There was a I saw a poll from May of last year, and it was talking about the respondents said that charging infrastructure was kind of their most of them believed that that was the big reason why EV sales were lacking in Ontario, which is lagging behind Quebec and BC in terms of EV adoption rates. Um, and that belief that the lack of charging infrastructure, along with the lack of a provincial rebate here, was kind of the main reason holding back um, EV sales in Ontario. Even this is just what respondents believe. Whether that's true or not is another question. You could say that maybe supply was the big issue last year, holding back demand. But the fact that people believe EV infrastructure or the lack of infrastructure is what's holding back adoption is important. And I think you know the other day I had a EV here in Palm Springs, and I was trying to I had to there's nowhere to charge at the place I'm staying, so we had to go find a charger. And you know when you punch that into Google in the car's nav, I went to a grocery store that had a charger, um, just because it was the one with like a good fast charger that was available. So um, I think it is, yeah, there's a lot of incentive for companies, businesses to start embracing that because it will attract customers.
It seemed like to me that for the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years, automakers and government were sort of waiting for the other one to blink and like start
Hmm.
building up the infrastructure. And it seems like now automakers are realizing that if they want to sell the cars, they can't like out battery their way out of range anxiety.
Hmm.
Like the key is to build up a lot more infrastructure. And like Ford, Mercedes, Volkswagen, and a lot of other makers, they're all getting into the game and building out infrastructure.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess my question is, what would you suggest if you're one of these automakers or someone else that's connected to the auto industry? Like, how would you evolve your storytelling to sell more cars, essentially?
I mean, I think you saw some good examples in the Super Bowl ads this year. So many of them were for electric vehicles, and same story last year. Um, I think, like I said, at this point, it's not enough to just have an EV, to just tell a story about, hey, we made an EV. It's so innovative. It's just not the case anymore. There's, yeah, 40 different EVs on sale across North America, soon to be 80. It's not enough to just say that you've got an EV anymore. We're past that first phase. Um, and so there's got to be something else. It's got to be. Um, I'm thinking of Mercedes with their whole dashboard of their EV is like one giant screen, or BMW, their new EV has a theater display that folds down in front of rear seat passengers, and or Ford with hey, we made an EV that's a pickup truck, and it can power your house in the case of an emergency. Uh, I think there's got to be some other aspect to it, some other part of the story that you can tell people. Obviously, there's no one size fits all solution. Like every EV is different, the customers are different. Um, so I'm not going to say what story they need to tell, but it just can't be only the fact that this vehicle's electric anymore. That's not good enough. That's not attention grabbing anymore. Um, the other thing I'll say, and I think we saw this in the Super Bowl ads, is just make it fun. Like, EVs aren't gonna save the planet single-handedly. They're not, you know, are some savior. It's like, don't be too serious about it. They're just cars, and a big part of the appeal of EVs, having driven so many, is that they're actually just really fun to drive. They're just great, and yeah, just I think lean into the fun aspects, maybe some more irreverent, less serious stuff, like we saw with that Will Ferrell Super Bowl ad was great. Um, yeah, but I think those are kind of what I would be thinking about in terms of storytelling from if I was a marketer, trying to sell EVs this year.
On that fun aspect, you've done a lot of really cool trips. If there was one that you could, repeat, the car, the location, all that,
Oh
what would it
man,
be?
I mean, there's obviously too many different cars and places to answer that question, but because we're talking about EVs, maybe I'll pick an EV. And I think, it was the first time I drove an electric car on a racetrack. It was mind blowing. Like, it was just so alien and so weird and foreign, um, and fast, just mind-bendingly fast compared to even like the fastest Lamborghini, the fastest combustion engine supercar. And it was the Porsche Taycan on a racetrack. It
Well, let's
just
just give the audience an idea of speed. So right now I think we have two EVs, the Tesla Model S Plaid and the Lucid Air,
mhm,
that do 0 to 100 in 1.98 seconds.
claimed, yeah,
Claimed,
we'll
yeah.
see.
We haven't done it.
Yeah,
How like, what's, I don't know
it
if you know
just
the numbers
hurts.
off the top of your head. What's like a very respectable sports car? A gas-powered
Uh,
sports car?
I mean, the $5 million Bugatti Chiron or whatever it was would get absolutely blown away on a drag race by Tesla's just family sedan, four-door with your kid seat in the back these days. So yeah, EVs can, even like there's the new Kia um, EV is just so like as fast as a Ferrari from 8 years ago. Uh, they're just like there's almost no contest. It's almost not fair, um, and that it's not even new. I mean, there had the company that became Lucid had a delivery van that could outdrag a Dodge Viper 8 years ago. Like, it's just this kind of speed. If you've never experienced it, it's just like picture being put in a slingshot where you get this huge hit of power all at once. You get everything right away, and it catches you off guard. Um, and yeah, just go try and experience it.
Thanks. This has been really interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I love Matt, I love talking with you and chatting EVs and story ideas and everything. So thank you very much for coming on today and sharing your perspective.
Yeah, anytime, Jordan. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks everyone out there for watching.
As we mentioned earlier, our Next in Creative report is available for download. If you'd like the report or if you have any follow-up questions, you can email us at the link right there. Oh, my hand's on it. Anyways, um, be sure to subscribe to our Studio Vibes newsletter for more thought leadership and all things content marketing, and follow us at Globe Content Studio on LinkedIn. We're planning another great show next month. Details are coming soon. But for now, thank you very much for joining us and have a great day.